Even before the Second World War started, the German intelligence reported that the US had been well on its way in developing high-altitude planes. But when whole armadas of four-engine bombers started razing German cities and factories to the ground, the Luftwaffe forces were incapable of doing anything with them. None of the fighters the Germans had at the time could reach the American B-17s and engage them at those altitudes. The culprit for that devastation was none other than Reich Marshal Goring himself. It was he who straight up banned German aircraft designers from creating high-altitude fighters. Too expensive, he said. We never need them, he said. And all of a sudden, in the middle of 1942, the German command was puzzled. How come we can't down flying fortresses? Make all those engineers drop everything they were doing and create a fighter for us right now. So Kurt Tank got down to business. Now, it's important to understand that a high-altitude fighter at the time needed three main components: high-altitude aerodynamics, a pressurized cockpit, and the most important part, a high-altitude engine with a turbocharger. By the end of the 1930s, it had already been done on some American planes, such as the P-43 Lancer and the newer, formidable P-47 Thunderbolt. Kurt Tank was especially inspired by Seversky's idea to take the turbocharger out of the engine and put it behind the cockpit so that the exhaust fumes would have some time to cool down while moving through a long pipe. So why reinvent something when you could just use all those solutions on an existing Focke-Wulf 190? Giving it a pressurized cockpit and making the wings a bit longer was simple enough. All they needed was a turbocharger, and they found one. Exactly one. In the whole Reich. Why one? Because any turbocharger development had also been banned, and also by Goring's orders. The only prototype was so crude that even those turbochargers that they salvaged from down B-17s worked better in the Luftwaffe labs, even after actually falling from the sky. Once they tried to install it on the experimental Focke-Wulf 190C, they realized that it would actually need a whole new plane for it. There wasn't enough space for the cumbersome mechanism inside the compact Focke-Wulf 190. So they had to put it into a large belly sort of pouch, which gave the machine a hurtful nickname, Kangaroo. As for the exhaust pipes, they had to be put onto the sides of the fuselage, which certainly didn't help with the aerodynamics. And even with all those compromises, they just didn't have enough turbochargers. So Kurt Tank decided to redirect his efforts into solving the problem without them. He used everything he could. The newest inline engines with high-altitude centrifugal superchargers, water methanol injections, and even nitrous oxide, which didn't exactly give the plane more speed, but at least it kept the engine from losing power for some time at high altitude. All these engineering tricks and devices resulted in the Ta-152H, a very specialized fighter with the widest possible wingspan. Those wings allowed the plane to glide at high altitudes, but made it useless in any fights below 5 kilometers. Meanwhile, the Thunderbolts ruled the German skies unchallenged, easily fighting off most of the German fighters that tried to intercept the flying fortresses and the liberators. They were even quite effective near the ground, paralyzing the Reich wherever they could. The Luftwaffe command and Goering himself were furious, blaming the engineers for their stupidity, blaming the pilots for their cowardice, and blaming fate for being so cruel. Goering didn't seem to realize his own mistake. Kurt Tank wasn't eager to explain. And why would he?